Okay, so Hari Dave, is there anything? Sorry. On the call, we have Vraj Bhumi, Haridas, Vijay Kumar, Archana and Karnam, Kanuram, Sumati, Babru, Sevamrita, Anandamai, Ujvala, Drishta, Geeta, Kevin, Kishore, Amla Bhakti, Bhaktabil, Saragrahi, Manohar, Uddhava, Gokul Chandra, Rohini, Paul, Kalakanta, Lalita, Saki, Alexa, Govinda Madhava, Padmanabha Swami, Indra Nuja, and anyone else who just got on that I didn't quite get. So is there anything that you'd like to share?
Well, good morning, or afternoon, or evening, whatever may be the case. Depends where you are. Nice to be on the call. I don't have any news in particular. It's a nice time here at Aladarga. Winter is setting in, and the change of the season brings with it some interesting features to deal with. So we're busy with that, and I hope that today, well, maybe today, I will finish I'm writing on this section of the midday pastimes of Krishna and the Radhakund area of the Dham. And I hope to finish that today. Move into the afternoon when the cows come home. So that's what I'm up to. What are the questions this morning?
Yeah. So Babru, you can unmute yourself, *6.
Dandavat, Srila Guru Maharaj. Morning. My question is about Brahmins in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So regarding the more recent, I guess, age of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, it seems that people are getting initiated as Brahmins, and maybe, but not everyone will have the Brahminical tendencies. So I was wondering about how that relates with, say, for instance, like in previous times, it's my understanding that not everyone was Brahminically initiated. Say, for instance, there's the famous pastime of Narottam Das Thakur, where some people were criticizing him because he wasn't a Brahmin, but he was initiating devotees. Anyway, so the point is that I'm wondering is is there room for not being a Brahmin yet receiving Gayatri mantras, or like, for instance, did devotees in recent times, did they receive Gayatri mantras and they weren't considered Brahmins?
Yeah, I think I understand your question, and it deals with the tension between two different paths, if you will, or different levels of spirituality. One being the social-religious system of the culture, of Vedic culture, referred to as Varna Ashram, and the other being the Prema Dharma, the Bhakti Marg, as articulated by Rupa Goswami and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So these two, there's some ways in which they work together, and some ways in which there's tension between them, and one the latter, bhakti, steps on the head of the other varnashram dharma. And there's a number of examples, but perhaps the clearest of them all is the very center of the Bhagavatam, where the gopis are cowherd people and women who typically weren't educated in those days, and they hold the highest position in relation to the Godhead, far exceeding, for that matter, the status of the upper echelon, if you will, within the social religious system, which are the Brahmins. So the teaching is that there is where you have a social religious structure where the moral life is the primary concern. It doesn't extend in its reach into, in and of itself, that is, into experiential spiritual life, contemplative life, which, for example, which would be retiring from the social religious intercourse and so forth. Let's put it another way: it's one thing to color your human life with religious crayon or paint, and everything that you do as a human, giving birth, conceiving, marrying, and so on and so forth, is all connected with religious ritual and so forth. So you're coloring your whole human life religiously. And then it's another thing to transcend the limits of humanity altogether. The former is meant in a broad way to help bring us to that. And therefore, we have two sets of inquiries, in one sense, with regard to the sacred text of the Hindus. One is Dharma Jignasu. Jignasu means inquiry. So inquiry into how to be religious, and as far as possible, live in the world in the most ethically sound, morally sound way to be a good citizen. And that in consideration of the idea that there is a dharma to the world. The world has purpose. It's purposeful, meaningful, and so on and so forth. And then you have Brahma Jignasu. Jignasu means inquiry. Inquiry into Brahman, the nature of the Atma, the nature of the Absolute. In the Varnashram system, the religious inquiry, you're not really inquiring about the nature of the Absolute as much as you're inquiring about how to live in consideration of the Absolute in your everyday life. But the main focus is your everyday life, and to make it happier and better and more prosperous and so forth. And in order to do so, an element of sacrifice is part of the equation, and the very kind of, in a remote sense, the idea that giving is really the getting. But it's remote. It's like, to give an example, I live in the world and I depend on the sun. So I appreciate the sun. I venerate the sun. Without the sun, my mind would be disturbed. I wouldn't have the vegetation. There wouldn't be the evaporation, or certain rain, and so on and so forth. So the sun is a provider in so many ways. So I venerate the sun. But I don't ask or wonder or ponder what's going on inside the sun. I just think of what the sun does for me. But I don't think what's going on inside the sun. What are those nuclear explosions? What are its life? Does it have a life? It must have a life. So the latter is more the inquiry into the nature of Brahman, the nature of the Absolute, the serious and spiritual inquiry, wherein we find that I am of a nature that is resembles the Absolute. I am consciousness. I'm not matter. So again, I'm transcending the limits of humanity. Whereas in the other social religious system, the Varnashram, I'm becoming the best human. I could be, which should culminate in having done that, making this inquiry. We find in the Bhagavad Gita, for example, in the first chapter, Arjuna gives all these reasons for not participating in the war, and they were all religious and sound from a religious point of view. But Krishna, when his answer in the second chapter, takes it from inquiry about how to live in the world to inquiry into the nature of consciousness. And so Arjuna's ready for that inquiry because he's fully inquired into how to lead a religious life. Now, while that may be the norm in that culture, you go through the religious life, and at a certain point, you start to inquire more deeply in the nature of the absolute, rather than what the Godhead can do for you, what you can do for God, so to speak. And that's the normal, so to speak, course by which one will gradually start to inquire further and move from religious life to what I call spiritual, experiential life, life of ecstasy, a life of really, really realizing that less is more, and so forth. However, that inquiry, higher inquiry, can also come about just by good association, by sadhu sangha, with powerful sadhus who are of such a nature in terms of their inquiry, pursuit, experience, and so forth. We can move in that direction. So you have the two, and within the inquiry of the higher nature, then there are measures or degrees of that. We could say from inquiring about Brahman, you could have rasa jignasu, inquiring about, because I could inquire what is the nature of Brahman, and the first answer is, well, you are like Brahman. If there's anything in the world that's most like God, it's you. It's your consciousness. You're not a biological entity ultimately, but you're your consciousness, and consciousness is not a product of biology or matter. Experiential life is not a product of non-experiential stuff. So that's the first inquiry. But then, as I say, to go further, I may have a likeness to God. Okay, so I'm different from matter. I should pursue that. And then further, what's the nature deeper of the life of the Godhead? That's where we talk about rasa. It's a very high ideal. It's not easy to talk about. It's much harder, even if you could talk about it, to realize it, of course. But you get a taste for that through good association. That'll be your ideal, and so you'll pursue it. Now, that said, so there's that tension between the varnashram, the social religious system, and the mystical pursuit. In this case, we're talking about Vaishnavism as the mystical pursuit. And that tension is further illustrated in, for example, let's take the life of the Prince of Peace, if you will, the rebel Jesus of Nazareth, who was rejected by the Jewish people. So, he was certainly a morally sound person, but he was speaking about something that the tradition at its heart is about, I would say, but the practitioners, couldn't identify it. So it's often the case that within, let's say within Islam, you have the Sufis, you have people like Rumi, and certainly highly evolved spiritual person, but the Islamic fundamentalist orientation doesn't appreciate it at all. The nice thing about Hinduism is that built into the whole teaching is this very idea, very strongly, that there is this mystical side. There is, the departure from worldliness that constitutes real, the beginning of real spiritual, experiential life, rather than improving the world, so to speak. So there's more of a place for mystics, and tend not to be persecuted as they have been perhaps in other traditions that don't maybe make that as clear or haven't made that as clear in some basic text and so forth. You have Francis, the Pope, another example within Catholicism, who was, I think that he was brought before the Pope and questioned and as being, a heretic or something like that. And ultimately the Pope bowed to him. I don't know the whole story, but something like that. Just another example. So this tension between the social religious orientation and the mystical, spiritual, experiential orientation. And within Vaishnavism, then certainly Vaishnavism, bhakti, rag bhakti, the bhakti of to Krishna and so forth, as taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we call it prema dharma. So it transcends the varnashram dharma. Varnashram fosters a certain identity as a Brahmin, an intellectual, as a laborer, Sudras may be the case. Those determinations are based on the way in which the gunas, the modes of nature, are affecting one's psyche and one's physiology, one's physio-psychological makeup under the gunas would dictate certain propensities of the person. And so the system is set to try to capture those propensities and engage people accordingly. And all of those different engagements are important for the healthy body of the society. So you need legs for the society, you need a stomach, you need arms, you need a head. So that's the basic idea of the laborers, the Sudras, the stomach, the Vaishyas, the arms, the Kshatriyas, and the head, the Brahmins. And if everybody does their duty according to their propensity, they're going to be materially in balance. Now, the underlying teaching here is if you're in material in balance psychologically and physiologically, then you're standing on both feet, you're in a better position to jump up and ultimately touch the stars in the pursuit of mukti and bhakti, the post-mukti experience, and so forth. So there you go. One's supposed to, in one sense, lead to the other. Although piety, if you will, unto itself is not going to give you bhakti. You need for bhakti. You need bhakti. You need association with devotees. So at any rate, there's the varnashram, and then there's bhakti marg, varnashram dharma, prema dharma. So the idea is that if you want to make this point, then you're going to say that the Brahmins, who are the kind of in one sense, the upper end of the varnashram, they're the head, the intelligentsia, the religious priests, who preside over all the different religious rituals that again color the human experience in a positive way. They are venerated. They're supposed to be selfless, and their qualities are mentioned in the texts. But as high as they may be within the social religious system, or as worthy of regard, the bhakti marg path transcends the entire varnashram system. So therefore, one can reason that, well, if I am initiated into Gaudiya Vaishnavism, I'm initiated into a path that transcends the varnashram. So I'm above the Brahmin, so to speak. Now you may be, because you came to Vaishnavism through sadhu sangha, despite being let's say a very impious person, you met you came out of the bar drunk and some devotee helped you and spoke to you that night and stuck with you and it changed the course of your life. There are examples like that. So without going through a religious system and becoming morally sound, and so when it comes to have appetite for and interest in spiritual life, you may not, in that situation, the Brahmin may have more good qualities and be more apparently religious, but his ideal is not as high. And And we should judge a person not by their past, it is said, that's generous, and by their present, but in this case, we're judging them by their ideal, by their future, what they'll become. So it's even more generous. I've given an example before that if you are the CEO, COE, what is it, CEO?
CEO.
CEO of a corporation that has 10 stories and you live on the 10th floor, and I am a doorkeeper in the building next door that has 100 stories, well, your position seems higher than mine. But because I'm connected with a 100-story building, I have the capacity, theoretically, to work my way into the company and become a CEO on the 100th floor, looking down at you on the 10th floor, where you look like a doorkeeper, a doorman in comparison. So the prospect through good association that one has in Vaishnavism is such a spiritual prospect that transcends the limits of the Varnashram system. So in that sense, you can say that one who receives the Vaishnava Diksha, Vaishnava initiation, is a Brahmin and more in potential. Brahmin and more in potential. And of course, he or she, the Vaishnava should be humble and conduct themselves appropriately. And the mandate of Mahaprabhu is to be more humble than a blade of grass, tolerant than a tree. This is the decorum of a devotee, to honor others, expect no honor for oneself, and so forth. So our kind of moral compass or guideline is to say it further, is to accept what's favorable for bhakti, to reject what's unfavorable for bhakti. That makes for a very nice person in this world. So in that sense, as I say, the Vaishnav transcends the Brahminical reach, and he or she is a Brahmin and more. Now, typically in times gone by, from the time of the inception of Gaudiya Vaishnavism up until the early part of the 20th century, if someone was in the Varnashram system and had received the for example, the sacred thread and did the Sandhya Mandanam and chanting the Gayatri mantra at the dusk, at dawn, midday and dusk, and so forth. If they came in touch with the Vaishnavism and were initiated into the path of Vaishnavism, they would take off their thread by way of saying, now I'm on a different path. I've transcended the limits of the Varnashram. Now, but in the 20th century, the innovative Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was in our lineage, the guru of my guru, he did something different. He started giving the thread to people in India who were his disciples, who were initiated into Vaishnavism, because the climate was such that people weren't thinking highly of Vaishnavism because it had been misrepresented. And the Brahmins, on the other hand, who had a monopoly on religion, and they were exploiting people, which is a symptom of Kali Yuga. And so in order to give his budding new Vaishnavas enthusiasm, and he would say, now you're more than a Brahmin, so I give you the Brahmin thread. And then also if the common people saw them with the thread, they'd think, oh, they must be spiritually advanced. Whether you have a thread or not makes no difference. So it was rather superficial and a kind of a strategy for preaching at the time that he invoked. But it had the same purpose behind it, giving the thread as taking the thread off. It did previously. So whether that's necessary now to give a thread or not, I mean, obviously it's a different climate and time and circumstances, and I don't think it is necessary. It's certainly not required or part of Vaishnavism to have a thread. Let's spare a minute. Let's take one of the prominent aspects of the Brahminical life, which would be, as I said, to conduct religious rituals and to reside, or let's say, and to care for the deity, right? So the Brahmins in the ordinary religious society would care for the deity in the temple, do the puja, and so forth, and then they would preside over the religious rituals, which would be conducted in the temple, or they would bring some semblance of the temple to the home, and so forth. Now, That's one type of worship of the deity. But archan, or worship of the deity, is also an anga, or a limb of the body of bhakti. So anyone who has Vaishnava initiation can engage in the service of the deity, which from a social religious point of view is only the occupation of the Brahmin. Hmm? Hmm? But when it's the occupation of the Brahmin, you know, what is his thinking of the deity? His thinking of the deity is more like what I said earlier, thinking of the sun as what it can do for me rather than what I can do for the sun. When it starts to shift of what I can do for the sun, you're moving from Varnashram orientation to a Vaishnav orientation. Hmm? So if someone is given Vaishnav Diksha, they can do archan for the deity. Whether they have a thread or not, you know, it's not required. They can act like a Brahmin in that sense. At the same time, you know, people's conditioning is difficult to overcome. It's acquired over many births with no beginning. So they may be initiated into Vaishnavism, but they may carry with them, obviously, their conditioning, their psychophysiological propensities, right? So it's wise, therefore, in the spread of Vaishnavism to try to engage those who are initiated in activities that constitute bhakti, that are in accordance with their propensities under the influence of the gunas, because they have now this potential to transcend the gunas and more, but they haven't transcended them yet. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Bhakti Vinod, they try to take that into consideration and create a whole range of human activities by which engaging in, when we be engaging in bhakti, that meant creating a mission, you know, and instead of just initiating people and saying, go chant, you know, not so easy to do. You may have faith, but then your conditioning gets in the way and so forth. So there's some scope for that. And in that sense, then some persons who come to Vaishnavism, they may have more of a Brahminical psychology, let's say, and others may have more of a, on the other end of the spectrum, a laboring psychology. So it would be wise to engage them accordingly. They'll be more fulfilled in a human sense and in a better and stronger position to pursue the ideal. So I compare the two to horizontal growth and vertical growth. The former being that consideration of the gunas and their influence, and then the vertical growth being what we want to accomplish ultimately by any horizontal growth. So we take the horizontal growth into consideration in light of the pursuit of vertical growth, not unto it to itself. So I don't know if that it really answers your question. It's a pretty broad response, but
that I had it was that answers a large part of it. The one thing that I'm not clear on is, in the past, people were receiving mantras without being considered Brahmins.
Well, you don't have to be a Brahmin to receive the Vaishnav mantras.
Okay.
Why would you have to be a Brahmin to receive Vaishnav mantras? It's said, in fact, Sat Karma Nipano Vipro Mantra Tantra Visharada, that if you have all the good qualities of a Brahmin, but a Vaishnavo Guru Nasat Vaishnava Sapacho Guru, but you're not a Vaishnav, you can't be a guru. But if you come from a family of dog eaters, but you become a Vaishnav, that being your background, you can be a guru. You could serve as a guru if you're advanced enough. Point being that the dog eater is a word that refers to, well, people that aren't Brahmins. Uh, and they could receive Vaishnava initiation. So why do you have to be a Brahmin to receive Vaishnava initiation? All you need is sadhu sangha and the requisite faith. That's the adhikar. The eligibility for the path of bhakti is faith in the path of bhakti. The eligibility in other paths is faith in the path plus something else. In bhakti, it's only faith. You don't need anything else. You want to pursue the marg of yoga, you have to have faith in the path, otherwise how are you going to take it up? But you also have to be celibate, according to the Yoga Sutra, according to the Gita. So it's a pretty high extra qualification. So just to give you an example, in bhakti, all you need is faith in the efficacy of bhakti, which is going to come from associating with those who have that faith, that it's contagious, and then you're eligible to tread the mark. So once you have that eligibility, you receive initiation. Obviously, you're going to receive other instructions and whatnot, and you're going to qualify yourself more as you go along. But what's going to qualify you is the very bhakti that you're doing, not something else. We don't qualify ourselves in some other way in order to be more qualified for bhakti. Nothing can qualify you for bhakti. Only bhakti can qualify you for bhakti. If something else could qualify you for bhakti, then it would be higher than bhakti. So there's no need to be a Brahmin to receive Vaishnav Diksha, Vaishnav initiation, and mantras, and so forth. As far as there are a number of mantras that we characteristically give at the time of Diksha. One of the mantras that Bhaktisiddhanta gave was the Brahma Gayatri, which is the mantra for the Brahman's initiation in the Varnashram system. But the mantra properly understood according to the Sandarbhas of Jiva Goswami, Tata Sandarbha, Paramatma Sandarbha, only is only speaking about Krishna, really. And the Bhagavatam is said in the Garuda Purana to be a commentary on the Gayatri mantra. So it's in that sense, it's also a Vaishnav mantra. So what's the harm? If you have eligibility for Vaishnavism, you could chant that mantra. And there are other mantras. Of course, the Gopal mantra is our main mantra in Kam Gayatri. So does that help? Something further?
Yeah, that helps. That definitely helps. One more further thing is it, say for instance, is it a problem if someone doesn't, I mean, this is of course, it's the classic question, but I'm trying to come from an angle of, I know there's some devotees in modern Gaudiya Vaishnavism that think everyone shouldn't be considered Brahmins or shouldn't, and part of that package is not receiving the mantra. So I'm wondering, is that a problem for those devotees that may not receive that mantra because their guru thinks that they aren't qualified to be Brahmins?
Which mantra? The Gayatri mantra?
Yeah, the Gayatri mantras.
Well, the Gayatri mantra is the prototype of all mantras. So all the Vedas come from Om, Gayatri, and then all the Vedic mantras, right? So it's far-reaching in one sense, and could be looked at in different ways in terms of its implication. Jiva Goswami makes a very good explanation, and the Purana, I quoted the Padma Purana or Garuda Purana as well, does, by way of saying the Bhagavatam is a commentary on it, what they've done, Jiva Goswami and the Bhagavad, is point to the highest conception that the Gayatri mantra points to and helps us to cultivate. So that said, because the Gayatri mantra is broad, and could be, different things can be derived from it besides all that it has to offer. There are other Gayatris, and among them the Kam Gayatri. The Kam Gayatri in the lore and the mythology, the mytho-historic Puranic texts and so forth, you find that that Gayatri was stolen by Brahma to be his wife at a time when his wife Saraswati couldn't participate in a sacrifice, and he needed a wife. So his assistants stole somebody from the village in Braj, a young gopi, and she became Gayatri. The inhabitants complained, and Vishnu appeared and said, well, to make up for this, I will appear in your family at some point. So that's Krishna, right? But when Krishna did appear in the family in Braj and started performing his pastimes, and the gopis the young ladies had all the opportunity to associate with him in that way, Gayatri, Brahma's wife, thought that she got cheated. So she had the opportunity to incarnate as the Kama Gayatri, and as the personification of the Kama Gayatri to participate in Krishna's Rasa Leela, to make it short. So the implication, the idea is of this story is that all that's found in the Brahma Gayatri, if you want to take only the highest reach of that and put that into one Gayatri mantra, that's Kama Gayatri. So Kama Gayatri is kind of the Krishna Gayatri that goes with the Krishna mantra, the Gopal mantra that we give. So I think every Vaishnav, gives that mantra. If he didn't give the Brahma Gayatri, it would be for reasons of varnashram, and that again, with the idea that this is principally given in the varnashram, we have a different mark, so we don't need to give that. There'll be no loss. Or when Bhaktisiddhanta began to give it to his students, he only gave it to the male students, which was a varnashram perspective on the mantra. If you have a varnashram perspective on the mantra, then it's not given to the females, it's given to the males. Whatever that means, we don't have the time to go into that, but we're not varnashramis, so it doesn't matter. But because of what he was doing in his preaching strategy, he felt he could only go so far and whatnot. So he did like that. He gave it to the men, and then people thought, oh, they're Brahmins and blah, 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 so on. But all that's, preaching strategy that's whose shelf life has expired. And we're living in a different culture and time and so forth. So basically, in short, the guru doesn't give the Brahma Gayatri to his male or female disciple, she's certainly not missing out on anything. And why would the guru want his disciple or her disciple to miss out on anything? So it wouldn't be with that in mind. But yeah, some people, unfortunately, followers of Bhaktisiddhanta and my Guru Maharaj over time, they've misunderstood this entirely, and so they seem to think that unless certain things within the varnashram are in place, your bhakti won't be efficacious, which means that their bhakti is covered by karma. The thought that something within the realm of karma is required in order to be a devotee. It's not. Anyway, bhakti is nirguna. So I hope that helps.
That helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to be helpful. What else? More questions?
Radhana, can I just jump in there?
What is it?
I just wanted to jump in there, and I think the confusion also, I believe Prabhupada sometimes call it the Brahmin initiation. So that probably added to the confusion.
Yeah, the problem is not the problem is not Prabhupada. The problem is persons, disciples of Prabhupada, not being able to understand him in context, what he was doing historically, where his contribution is, what Bhaktisiddhanta was doing, as I'm mentioning with regard to this, and so on and so forth. They're not able to sort all that out, so they just go and read some statement in a book, and they think, I'm only going to read Prabhupada's books, which is not what the books say themselves, but they're a bit fundamentalists, fanatical like that, so that all these distortions come out. Yeah. They think women can't be gurus, for example. They say, some of them, well, women don't receive the thread. How can they be gurus? You should hang them with the thread, is what you should do.
Did someone else have another question, like a follow-up question?
Yes, I wanted to say something related to this. Because I was, raised in ISKCON, so always they gave me this idea that in order, to become a devotee, in order to get initiation, first initiation, then second initiation, I need to follow rules. So it's like this idea, I wanted to, for you to explain further, on this, if there are requirements, for you to get, Diksha. There is, certain which requirements, are logical and which requirements are not logical. Because many things not everybody can do.
You want me to comment on that?
Yes.
Well, as I said earlier, the eligibility for bhakti depends on faith, right? So we have different levels of eligibility. There are those whose faith is weak, they're eligible. There's those whose faith is strong because it's been fortified by the scriptural logic and argument and so forth in their experience. And then there are those whose faith is superlative, so to speak. And so the terms are kanishta, adhikari, madhyamadhikari, uttamadhikari. That means their eligibility, adhikar, to tread the path. There's a neophyte level of eligibility, there's an intermediate, and there's a superlative level of it. Superlative level is like fully acquainted with the scriptural argument in an essential way and able to represent it dynamically and so forth. The intermediate has faith based on the scriptural argument, but may not be able to, is not maybe living entirely within that. And then the neophyte or the novice, his faith is weak, so it could be at least temporarily suppressed by other arguments. So it's all about faith. That said, if the guru is going to give initiation to a disciple, he or she has the prerogative to add other things on that they feel, that he or she feels is important if you want to learn from them. But to tread the path in general means that faith is awakened. Nam is given. For example, it's said that by Bhaktivinoda in one of his nice songs that Nityananda Prabhu set up a shop and he was selling the holy name of Krishna for the price of faith only. Generally, in our lineage, we give the name based on faith, and as someone becomes more acquainted with the teaching through chanting and hearing from the guru and so forth, then we give the mantra diksha. So we give Nam, the name, and then we give the mantra diksha later on when they become more qualified in terms of bhakti. Bhakti qualifies them further. But as I say, there may be, relatively speaking, I'm kind of giving an absolute perspective. Faith is all required. Then relatively speaking, within that, someone may require of their disciples something more than another, but that's relative. So let's take my Guru Maharaj, for example. He was coming to America. He had a new situation with people who were unfamiliar. The vegetarianism was not a popular idea, for example. So he required that his students become vegetarians before he would give them initiation. Let's look at something that contradicts that. Not contradicts that, but shows the relativity of that. There's a famous story of Narada Muni in the scriptures who met a hunter. And the hunter, he used to kill animals, of course, to eat and so forth, but he would take pleasure in half killing them and watching them die. So Nard was appalled by this, and he asked him, look, do one thing. I want you to chant this mantra, Nam, Ram Nam. He gave him the name of Ram, and stop half killing everybody. Just kill them all away. And so that's what he did. And he chanted Ram Nam. And when much later, when Nard visited him, this hunter saw his guru, and he went to pay his respects to him. But before he bent down, he saw there were ants scurrying on the ground. So he cleared them carefully before he put his head down. So he had become completely nonviolent and so forth by Ram Nam, and by following the one advice of Nard, just don't half kill them all away, something like that. So, you know, wherever the guru is teaching, he's going to look at the situation and maybe incorporate something else into that which he requires of the disciple to receive mantra and become officially his or her disciple, besides the faith. So Prabhupada's thing was to become a vegetarian, to not take intoxication, which was popular at the time, and to forego illicit sexual connections, which he had two definitions of. One was sex only within marriage for procreation. The other was sex only within marriage. He at different times explained it in each of those ways. And what was the fourth one? Not to gamble, something like that, to have a meaningful livelihood. Those are things that are mentioned in the Bhagavatam. They just happen to be mentioned in the Bhagavatam as symptoms of Kali Yuga, and the hoarding of gold as well, or money. So if you hoard money, the implication would be that all these things will also come, typically. So he asked his disciples to forego those things, and he asked them to chant a certain number of times at first, and they couldn't do that. So then he wanted them to chant 64 rounds a day. They couldn't do that. They tried 32. Then he said 16. They said that. So you can see the relativity of that too. Relativity of how much the guru may say, chant this many rounds on your beads, daily. That's a relative thing. The other things that I mentioned are relative, but they're good. I mean, they speak about the moral life. You have to look at it dynamically, vegetarianism is obvious, intoxication is obvious. That doesn't help even a function in the everyday world, the sexual idea, of course, is prominent for everybody. Everybody's defined in many respects materially by their sexuality, in many respects, at any rate. So, you might want to say that this is something that needs to be controlled. We're all a product of it, so must be good. But we are. But at the same time, it needs to be regulated, and I think everybody agrees that it needs to be regulated. Just how you want to regulate it. So we're not in agreement with anybody. And then what's your worldview? That may determine the extent to which you think it should be regulated. Everybody thinks you can't just go jump on somebody in the elevator or something like that because you like them. You're arrested for that. So everybody agrees on some level. Consenting adults, as may be the case. So if you take the sexual urge and you try to make it more than just an animal, function, then one of the thoughtful ways to do that is to say, harness this sexual urge by restricting it to one person with whom you have a committed relationship that requires sacrifice on your part, obviously, for it to be healthy and functioning, and for you to get what you need to get from it, which usually is the sex thing turns out to be, might be the beginning of it, what it's all about, but it turns out to be the least part of it. As one goes forward, it's what people think they're about until they do it, and then it's over, and then they want to do it. Then they want to get back into what they're really into. So it's a way of harnessing it, and makes sense. So that's now how to find your partner. Well, we live in a society where you experiment and try. So. In the Vedic society, they would arrange it beforehand with astrological considerations and so on and so forth, and meet the family and this. But their idea was that our goal was the same. People in this world who now today, in the modern world, arrive at a partner through experimentation, which would be horrifying in the Vedic culture. They want the same thing, and their parents want the same thing for them. They want to find a good partner and be happy ever after, have grandchildren, and so on. So however you come about doing that, I think, we have to look at the goal. But at any rate, I'm kind of going off on this a bit. I think that all these things are relative. But they're relative to the guru whom you're initiated by and what he or she thinks is important. And typically I think the relationship, the situation, was such that the guru and the disciple had more contact. Now you have, initiate people from Timbuktu because they met you on the internet, they're not living with you. Prabhupada had many disciples. I don't have very many. I'm not trying for it, but not to say that he was, but he was trying to expand very much, the dispensation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He had many disciples. Some of them never spoke with him, other than to here's your name, here's the mantra. Of course, he spoke to them in his books and so forth. So he had to give kind of broader principles that it was kind of a one size fits all. But one size doesn't fit all. That's the fact. So it had its limitations, and that shows up over time. So given that we may need a guru figure in our life in a more extended sense than, for example, when Prabhupada was here for 10, 12 years, they're gone, and his disciples were like 18, 19, 20, most of them, and they were initiated. So there's a lot of life ahead of you there after that 10, 5, 6, whatever year you got initiated time, and many things come up that he, if we're here, would have dynamically, adjusted in accordance with, and so on and so forth. In his absence, of course, he's present in what we call the Guru Parampara, the succession, make those determinations going forward. So you want to have a guru who understands the difference between principles and details, the latter being relative and subject to change, the former being that which we want to establish and serve through the details. Does that help?
Well, thank you very much. It was a great answer.
Okay.
Because in many cases it happens that many concepts I can understand, but it's hard for me to express with words to others.
Yeah.
It happens to me a lot. I don't know the enough scriptures, or I have the enough vocabulary, to express to others those ideas.
That's why, because you have some understanding. That's why when I speak from the scripture, then it resonates with you. So it's good. Yeah. I'll try to give you more words to explain so you can express what you already know.
Well, not everything I learned also a lot. But...
Hare Krishna. Me too. I don't have further question. Thank you. So I guess we're out of time, huh?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Thanks for your answers.
That's
Really
right.
nice. Yeah. Haribol. Stop the recording.